A very warm welcome to yet another special session of APAC Pharma Tech Innovation Conclave. We had some amazing panel discussion with eminent speakers from across the country in this from the field of pharma. Uh, Inaugural session were attended by several eminent speakers from the industry and also from the Naipur, Ahmedabad, and now we have a very important session that is on the supply chain management in this new world order. Supply chain management in the pharma sector plays a very crucial role, which has a direct impact on the healing process of a patient, on the public health. At the same time, it also manages depends a lot on the credibility of the industry, which is providing the essential drugs. So, to do the honors, we have a very special focused session, that is reimagining and re-strategizing supply chain management in the new world order. And we have our eminent speakers who would do the honors with their immense extensive experience in the field of pharma and the supply chain. Uh, Join me in welcoming Mr. Prasad S. Deshpande, who's a Senior Vice President and Head of Global Procurement Supply Chain with Biocon. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad, for joining us.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Mr. Madan Sampat, who is the Group General Manager, Country Head of Procurement and Supply Chain, Aster DM Healthcare. Welcome, Mr. Sampat.
Thank you, Sudheer. Good afternoon, everyone.
And we are also joined by Mr. Pradeep Mishra, who is the General Manager and Head Central Procurement and Supply Chain, Paras Healthcare Private Limited. Welcome, Mr. Pradeep. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Sudheer. Thank you so much.
And we are also joined by Mr. Vickram Srivastava, who is the Head of Planning, Ipca Laboratories Limited. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickram. With this, we would go ahead with the panel discussion, and we would have the initial remarks from each of the speakers. First, I would request Mr. Prasad to please give his initial remarks on how can we make the best in reimagining and re-strategizing the supply chain management in this new era of COVID-19. Over to you, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you, Sudheer. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be with all of you. And good afternoon, and great to be here with all our fellow esteemed panelists. Sudheer, this is indeed a critical moment. Everybody from age, the speaking age. So I would say a 2-3-year-old to the 80-year-old. Everybody's talking COVID. I had a fever last 3 days, and fortunately, my test result just came negative, so I was like very relieved. Had it been positive, I would have been at different place than here. But however, so talking about reimagining the new supply chain and re-strategizing about it, lot of things have changed over the period of the years, and I would say they accelerated in last 2 years with the onset of COVID pandemic across the world. So it is not only impacting the India, but it is impacting the world. Also, many people would know, but I would like to re-emphasize, and it's a pride of India, that India is called the pharmacy of the world. So when you look at from the pharmaceutical space, it's not only it is affecting India as a country, but from a pharma supply chain, it is affecting the whole world as well. And from the volume perspective, I would say one of the highest volume exporters for the pharma is India to US predominantly, and all other European and other countries as well. So now what does it mean? Now how do we look at it? So I would like to take it quickly to a couple of things also on top of the COVID. As I said before, COVID has accelerated the change, but we have a lot of things changing in last few years. So one example is the geopolitical reason. So the China relationship with India or US or other countries are changing the landscape of the pharma, because as many of you know, 70% of our bulk drugs come from China. So that is for the current state of the supply chain. How would you change that for tomorrow? So that's one thought we have to think about. So that then another thing which is changing is, previously it was the economies of scale, it was a bulk movement. You make big factories and you make the oral solid dosage and you distribute it into the big countries, and chain would extend it to either through the distribution to the warehouses, pharmacies, or to the hospitals. Now, as the events are changing, the devices are playing the major player. West Pharma, we have. So there are many of those which we are coming in. We are also doing more therapeutic medications where patients are administering themselves as the cost of healthcare is going up. So we have to think about a supply chain of last mile delivery of the patients. We have to also think about the new formats of the medicine. For example, even let's take the COVID. So fortunately, the vaccines which are available in India are in 2 to 8 degree centigrade for cold chain, but the Moderna in US is at -70. Now, how do you have that cold chain established across the country and to the last mile delivery when it is administered to the patient? So that's another way of thinking what it is. There is another thought process which is happening is, as the devices are getting more popular, how do you educate the patients to administer the medication? So that is also becoming the integral part of the supply chain. So previously it used to be only the materials, the factories, the distribution, and to the network, to the pharmacies. Now it is getting more exponentially complicated as more and more dimensions are getting added from I would say, the manufacturing or the pharma companies, from that perspective, to the end patient, where the health of the end patient is very important. So that's how I would like to open the conversation here. And back to you, Sudhir, for other panelists.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. As you rightly mentioned, it's not just in the last 2 years, things have changed dramatically. Now, I would come to our next speaker, Mr. Madan. Over to you.
Thank you, Sudheer. Very good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this wonderful forum and opportunity. Mainly to talk about the hospital or the healthcare supply chain, what has happened over the last, I would say, exactly a year now. Right, as everyone has painfully aware, the acute shortages of materials, starting with masks. The same time last year, everybody were running behind the PPEs and masks, and then started the ventilators, the ICU capacities, right, and the staff are like hamstringing the heroic efforts of healthcare professionals around the world to address the initial stage of the pandemic. So now more than ever, the right supply chain strategies is something that's key for us and the management practice, which were urgently needed to optimize the scarce resources, right, to alleviate the shortages what we had initially, with all the disruption in terms of supplies and identifying the local resources as well. So while we were implementing good management practices that can never substitute the dedicated and skilled medical practitioners, right? Improving the management of supply chain is critically needed to ensure that these professionals have the resource to do their job. So, what one of the key things what has happened over the last 1 year is in terms of the collaboration between the hospital and the pharmaceutical manufacturers, right? So which were more of a traditionally uh, they were more of a traditional and transactional partners for all these years, but now the relationship is changing dramatically as independent hospitals become part of a larger health system. They have improved their leverage as partners and have even transcended the role of simple purchaser today. So overall, we even started exploring the risk-based contracts with pharmaceutical partners, right, which are designed to link the drug practice to drug performance with actual patients. So this is something critical, as Mr. Prasad rightly said. Everyone is taking the self-prescription. They're reading online. They demand for the medications and so on. So we need to have clarity on how do we collaborate between the hospital and pharmaceutical companies in terms of the digital initiatives. Let's say there are blockchains that come in to track the last mile delivery and stuff like that. So I just want to stop here to give you the initial setup of what has happened, and as we move forward, I'd like to explain more on what the hospital went through and what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sampath. You brought in here a new aspect where the collaboration between the pharma producing company and the hospital. Now, I would come to Mr. Pradeep to have your initial remarks on the same. Mr. Pradeep.
Thank you, Sudheer. Thank you, Sudheer. Thank you, APAC Network, to give me a chance to be available here and share my views regarding supply chain. So, as my earlier colleagues told that India is a pharmaceutical factory for the world. So it means we are very good in manufacturing, and the cost of the medicines, the cost of the drugs is very reasonable in India. And most of the time, the things are very run in a very efficient manner, wherein all the medications and everything whenever required is available at a very reasonable cost. But we have seen, like Madan told earlier, we have seen in the situation of emergency or pandemic, wherein the whole supply chain system collapses. So last year also we have seen that there were a huge uh, disruptions in the supplies of uh, N95 masks, then 3-ply masks, PPE kits, and the problem in the supplies of gloves is still there is no solution for the supplies of the gloves. Then when the second wave came in April this year, so the whole system got exposed, right? Like now we don't have remdesivir supplies in our hospitals. I don't know about south part of India, but in north there is hue and cry regarding availability of the remdesivir. We are stock out of tocilizumab. Then meropenem, the cost of the meropenem is getting increased. Zinc, normal zinc tablets, paracetamol tablets, and other items which are being used in COVID, like amphotericin B. All those items are stocked out, and if you are able to get the stock, the price has been increased. So in a normal supply chain, in a normal system, this should not happen, because as a system, as an industry, we should be we should plan, or we should be ready enough to control all these requirements. It's not what is happening, that everyone is getting opportunity, and they are just squeezing the system. They are just encashing the opportunity in the moment of crisis. So the cost of remdesivir, everyone knows, it has been increased like anything. Paracetamol increased like anything. There is the cost of the meropenem is also getting increased. The only thing is that since India is a regulated market, you can't the MRP is under control. But what people are doing, if they are not able to sell on MRP, what they are doing, they are involved in the black marketing of the things. Now if a drug is available that is with MRP 4,000, what they will do, they will sell at 10,000 rupees in black market. So my point is that in spite of having a solid supply chain system, we are a pharmaceutical factory of the world. In these situations, everything, all the system get exposed, and now the scenario is that we are not we are not sure from where we will get our supplies. Right now I was just seeing at my operations, we are getting stock out with meropenem, with enoxaparin, with artacurium, lot of drugs which are stock out, and companies are increasing the cost. We need to do a lot of things in order to improve our supply chain, so that whatever happens, our system should run continuously, smoothly, without any scope wherein people can misuse the opportunity, the crisis as an opportunity.
Absolutely right, Mr. Pradeep. You have hit the chord where the people have suffered a lot because of it. Has you have rightly mentioned, the present scenario has exposed where, despite being a solid system, still the public at the end are suffering. And myself, my whole family was affected with COVID in October 2020. Back then, remdesivir injection was administered to us. Back then, it was like rupees 6,000, and in the second wave, I've come to know that it was being sold to between anywhere between 16 to 30,000. So of course there
Yeah.
is a lot needs to be done. Now I would come to Mr. Vickram Srivastava to have to please give his initial remarks. Over to you, Mr. Vickram.
Thank you, Sudheer. First, I would want to start with thanking APAC News Network for providing us this platform to share our views with respect to pharma supply chain and how we are going to reimagine and re-strategize to be prepared for any future disruptions. A very warm welcome to all my co-panelists as well, and to all my fellow listeners. So, before we start talking about re-strategizing and reimagining the supply chain, I would want to pause and, bring the attention of the group to what really happened. I mean, it was unprecedented. Uh, in supply chain parlance, a black swan event, so to speak. I mean, rarest of the rarest, blackest of the blackest black swans. But was it really a real supply chain disruption? I mean, supply chain professionals, we have faced these types of disruptions in the past. What was unprecedented in case of corona pandemic was both my demand and supply came to a grinding halt at the same time. So upstream and downstream value chain of the supply chain was impacted together. But having said that, supply chain professionals in pharma have faced issues like this in the past. Whether you talk about the recession, the a decade back, the financial recession, or the tsunami in Japan, or the volcanic eruption in Iceland, which completely stopped the air freight movement through Europe. So supply chain professionals, supply chain professionals, we are aware that these kinds of disruptions have happened. Corona was very unique in the sense because, like I said, it disrupted both supply and demand together. But having said that, we have to be prepared to face such kind of disruptions going forward as well. If we look
Yeah.
a little bit deeper into what really happened was, again, I would want to clearly call out over here that both the upstream and downstream. So if you look at upstream, my manufacturing and procurement got impacted. Manufacturing, because of course there were localized lockdowns across the country, across the world. So how do I get my manpower into the factory? We all are talking about digital, but the digital cannot exist without the physical. So we are in the business of making physical drugs. I mean, they need to be actually manufactured. So my supply chain was impacted on my manufacturing front. When I get my people to the factory, somehow I make special arrangements for them. I keep them isolated, I keep them contained, and bring them on board to my factories. How do I get the material to bring it to produce? China went into a lockdown. Mr. Prasad rightly said we are about 65-70% dependent on bulk drugs to China. So if China went into a lockdown, how do I procure my bulk drugs? How do I start my manufacturing? Forget my bulk drugs. If the country is in a lockdown, how do I procure my printed components? Pharmaceutical is not just about producing drugs. It is about packaging them and delivering it to the customer and patient. So how do I procure my printed components? So these are the critical nuances in the supply chain that we actually understood that were so important. And the silver lining to this, Sudhir, is that somehow the entire world now understands that supply chain is beyond logistics, it's beyond distribution. It involves critical strategy in procurement, in de-risking your vendors. It requires critical planning of capacities, your inventories and warehousing, and the entire chain is combined together with a digital, ERP or a digital footprint, which will give you visibility across all your critical nodes. So all these things have come together, in what has really happened in the last couple of, last year, which actually started sometime in February, March. So these were the two upstream, issues. Downstream, if you have to look at, the entire mayhem was there in demand sensing. I mean, pharmaceutical is supposed to be kind of, insulated with demand fluctuations, but this was one pandemic where, even we saw demand fluctuation, because a lot of people were not visiting the doctors, a lot of people were not doing elective surgeries, a lot of people were not trying to do self medication at home, try to take basic medicines and not venture out into the into the cities and go visit their general practitioners and all. So all these things changed with the customer also, so demand sensing became a huge challenge. And to sum it up, where we started last year is the ultimate, hit which has come from with respect to freight management, with respect to distribution and logistics. About 60 to 70% of pharmaceutical drugs move on passenger bellies, if it is going air shipment, and there are no air shipments now. I mean, because all passenger airlines are grounded, nobody is traveling around the world. So how do I get that space in the aircraft to have my ready shipment ship across the world? We are the pharmacy of the world. My esteemed panel members have already mentioned, we are the factory to the world when it comes to generic drugs. But how do I ship those drugs to across the globe? Not everybody can afford big wide-bodied freighters. So these are the few challenges that has come, Sudhir, in the last 1.5 years, which has only amplified the importance of supply chain and how we can de-risk it and manage it better. And I would like to pause over here and share more with respect to how we can reimagine and re-strategize in our further discussions. Over to you, Sudhir.
Thank you, Vikram. As you rightly mentioned, digital solutions are there when if only if physical activity is going on. And as you rightly mentioned, you must have faced several challenges to get your staff and workers to get the physical production activity to go on. And at the same time, you also throw light on how, as Mr. Prasad mentioned, and you also mentioned, like majority of our production and are dependent on China yet. I mean, 60 to 70%. Now, I would like to come to Mr. Prasad, if he could throw some light on how they managed and how well it can be re-strategized in the future, and we can make our supply chain more efficient. Over to you, Mr. Prasad. And you can also tell us the role of technology in that.
So thank you, Sudhir. So you asked me, I think in the question, 2-3 questions. So one is, what we'll do now better? That's your first question. Second is, how you will make it more efficient? That was your second question. And the third is, what is the technology what will be the play of the technology in there? So I think when we are looking from the perspective of there is one thing happening only. It's not only the China. Most of the countries are also becoming nationalistic now. So if you look at France, you look at the US. So there was one big news coming when the Serum wanted to make vaccines. There was a raw material issues. US first said no, then they added, then they gave. So it's not only coming from China. So last 2 decades, we went from, nationalistic to becoming a globalization. But when as Pradeep was saying, when the things got exposed, now everybody saying is go back to our own country. So the pointed answer to the bulk drug is, of course, Government of India has created a lot of schemes. India is now the next favored, I would say, the destination to make the bulk drugs as well. We already are the specialist in making the formulations. So we are backward integrating. When I say we, as in the whole country, and the bulk drugs, so that dependency on China will be reducing further. So that is the perspective of the response, which was the first part of your question. Second is more from a efficiency perspective. So with all due respect to everyone, I would doubt what is mean by better efficiency here. So the whole word itself is pandemic, which is above the word called epidemic. So what are we saying when the all the flights are down, when the manufacturing factories are down? So I question myself what we could have done better, more from an efficiency perspective. From an emergency response perspective, I think everybody is doing. So I'll give you a simple example. The oxygen has become a issue of the last 2 weeks, the highest. So there was in the last year, if you see, there was a pandemic, then there was a PPE kits, then the mask, then the remdesivirs, then the vaccination. Now we have come down to the oxygen. So we have small oxygen and nitrogen plants. So the questions were asked by the government. Can you lend us some? So we are with also a moral question. Shall we make with the same oxygen the medication to save the patients? Or shall we stop producing the medicine and give that oxygen to the hospital? It's not an easy question to answer. And it is, it will be say, oh, do both. But one has to give somewhere. The second point is, when the word pandemic happens, that is where everything is exposed. So do you build capacities for this kind of event, like Vickram said, the Black Swan events? So I think the last event something like that happened was in 1914, the Spanish flu. I think from the efficiency perspective, as an overall pharma industry has done a much better job than it was 50 years back, for example. Normally the vaccine used to take almost 10-20 years to make. Now we have developed vaccines in the humanity within a year. So those things are there. That response mechanism, I would call it, as shortened significantly. That I would speak the great volumes of the efficiency of the pharmaceutical companies. Can it go beyond? Obviously. Can it do more? Of course it can be done. As Pradeep was saying, his problems, which he was very correct in terms of certain medications he mentioned and the prices he mentioned. But it's not only the problem of north or south of India, it is a global issue. So there are, and it's not only the COVID or the mask or PPE kits, there are in fact bigger problems, and a huge population is wrestling. So I'll tell you, there are a lot of people with heart conditions, liver conditions, organ transplants. They are not getting now the beds because the priority is given to COVID. There are a lot of people who have finished the organ transplants, but they cannot come for the therapies because there is no space in the hospitals to help them out. So how do you handle that additional large population, which is, I hate to say this, is dying silently? See, because the focus today is on only the COVID deaths. For all you know, if we start seeing, there would be a more cardiac arrest right now because there is no open heart surgeries as much. I don't know. I mean, that there is that silent is happening. Now, there is a lot of diabetic population. So diabetes itself is a silent pandemic. So if it is not treated, the patients die, in a very serious manner. So, but today everybody is focused on COVID pandemic, hence all those other medications. So because before COVID also the hospitals were full, right? So what is happening to all those patients as well? Now the third point, as you mentioned, Sudheer, is what is the technology is playing the role. So technology is playing the role in multiple ways. So technology is playing the role from a supply chain perspective of the GPS location. So there are the normal technology which everybody knows. I will just not explain them. Everybody knows them. Everybody, whether it is GPS, whether it's Internet of Things, how you are making the better factories, better yield, how you are tracking. There is a blockchain, I think Madan mentioned. But there are also now the technology is coming where how do you pinpoint more The therapeutic segment, as in, imagine how vaccine was developed within a year. So technology played a great role into that. It used to be the endless trials. It used to be endless trial and error methods. Now the technology is helping from that R&D perspective. Technology is helping you from the manufacturing perspective, as how you will go faster and better to the customer. As I said, the technology is also helping now with the IoT. I'll give you a simple example. So diabetes, insulin, for example, the original, if you see 10-20 years back, it was an injection. Everybody has to administer an injection, everything before the meal. It's so painful, right? So now from the technology perspective, it has come to the pen. So where you just administer once a day pen. So that is a synthetic version of the insulin. Now there is a new technology which is talking about it will measure your glucose and the sugar levels right there, and it will tell you how to meter the dose. So that is helping the technology. Because imagine now most of the people who are sitting at home do not even have access to the doctors or the hospitals. How do you reach them? Then there is telemedicine. So there are a lot of ways the technology can be used and is already getting used, and it will remain the pivotal more than the traditional approaches, which is of course the logistics, the freight, the barcoding, blockchain. So I'm saying going beyond that, which is excuse me, that to the end patient, and I would say the outcome of the health of the end patient. So one is the way is the, like Vickram was talking about, the physical delivery of the medicines to the patient, but the second is the outcome of the health of the patient. So technology will help in first reading, monitoring, analyzing, and closed loop system to make it better. So I know there is a lot of areas in there, but it goes way beyond than just the medications or the prices or the pandemic which is happening, because the whole world pandemic itself is something which is happens in once a century, and I don't think anybody in the world, for that matter, forget the India, would have sensed the nature of this pandemic. But technology in coming years will definitely will be, I would call it as the mainstream of it. It would be a nice to have. It would be a must have for the pharma world, from the medicine as well as from the delivery perspective. Back to you, Sudhir.
Yeah. Sorry, there was a disconnect. Am I audible? Okay. Thank you very much, Prasad. You have actually brought in the limelight on how the technology has helped in this scenario. And now I would like to come to Mr. Sampat to give his view on same.
Sure, Sudheer. So before I start, I really liked when Mr. Prasad mentioned about where are we talking about efficiency, right? So that is one thing I keep hearing for the last 1 year, how efficient were we? So I would say as far as we survived the last 1 year, that means we were efficient some way or other. So we can't look into the operational efficiency on the cost quality now. It's about more of how did we survive each and every stage of this pandemic for the last 1 year. So, what I would like to say is on what front, how did we uh, overcome the stages of this in terms of the responses that we gave, right? And today it's more of repeating the same, right? It's ABC, and again from April onwards, it's come back to A. So mainly to ensure the faster and easy decision making, right, and procurement of material, and how do we categorize the response. So what we did beginning of the uh, March 2020. I remember when I was traveling across all the units. When I got the call, okay, we need to stock up on the N95s. That's the first thing I heard. I didn't even hear about what else happened. So we clearly define the strategy on how we want to go forward. So the Aster being they have major presence in Kerala. They went through the Nipah virus recently, so they have this experience of handling these such events just recently, right? So they said, okay, let's go ahead with the immediate response, followed by the sustained emergency relief, right? That will be like the second stage, and third one is the recovery. So what did we do on the immediate response? That really helped. That is more of a triangle approach, right? The procurement supply chain team, along with the finance and with the management, has to take a decision immediately, where we do have with the complex matrix organization where several approval layers were there. We have to cut through all that, define a process, at the same time ensure that in future there's going to be some audit requirements. We should have all documentations and justifications ready for every decision that was taken as well, right? So this really enabled us to provide immediate relief to all the critical events, right, that have a direct impact on life or public safety. So again, going back to what Mr. Prasad said, there were patients already in the hospitals, and we need to secure a certain number of beds for the COVID patients. So what happened to all? See, the cardiology events, or the oncology patients, all the cancer patients, they can't really do anything else. They had to come back to hospital. So we need to have the bed allocation done clearly for that. So in terms of immediate response, the threat is more of a catastrophic nature, right? And where if the response was delayed, it would result in increasing the harm to individuals or community. So we are pretty clear about how we want to go forward initially in terms of taking decisions and moving ahead quickly as possible. Um, so again, the second one moving forward will be more of a sustained emergency relief. Right, it was required to urgently sustain our hospital infrastructure, while in India, while all the hospitals were struggling to pay for the PPEs, and we know several clinics and small hospitals had to shut down their operations because they were not able to afford the cost of the operations, right? In terms of buying PPEs and managing the cost, initially it was sold at 1,000 and odd rupees. Now it has come down to 200 or 300. But all the small hospitals really struggled a lot in terms of managing their expenses. At the same time, the larger chains had a pressure to scale up their capacity, right? While we are spending on one side, we don't want to halt the projects where there are a lot of financial engagement in new projects, new development that has to come up. So it was more of a dynamic situation where one side we were focusing on the new projects where there were a lot of lockdowns, and the people are not there at site to work on the projects, that delayed in terms of the cash flow and so on. At the same time, we have to make sure the infrastructure is ready in the current premises wherever we are, right? Across all the 15 hospitals what we have in India, we have to ensure each and every hospital we follow the same routine. When we created the group with all the purchase managers for in all 15 hospitals and clinics and labs, we wanted to go with one single approach. So we don't want everyone to uh, uh, look at their own supplier, define their own pricing. So we ensured from the central procurement in terms of what is the strategy going to be, how do we make sure that we adapt to this particular strategy. Right? Anyways, there are bigger hospitals and smaller hospitals. There's no one right way to do things. There are various ways, but we want to make sure it's all captured in a proper manner so that everyone follows the approach sequentially. So in terms of recovery, what we did, this really helped us help the emergency situation in terms of containing it, and activities are returning to the normal procurement process later in the last year. I would say or the last quarter, Jan to March. That is when things started to come back to a little bit of normalcy. We clearly defined the process to be obtained. Again, we anticipated the issue with the vaccines coming in, and again the oxygen cylinders. And moving forward, we don't know. We are looking at the next crisis will be on the manpower. When looking at the current cases that's happening today, we have 3 lakh cases every day that's going on. So at least 4 to 5 people get infected because of this 3 lakh people, right? So moving forward, it's going to be lot more difficult in terms of managing the patients as such. So we expect the ICU beds to be more occupied as the next step. Maybe in June, July, it's going to be overburden on the system. So we are preparing in terms of the manpower allocation as well.
क्या हो जाता है?
So
रिटर्न में लेके आ कंप्लेन.
Pradeep, you may have to go on mute if you don't mind. Thanks.
Yeah.
So what we did, we followed these three relief measures, and what we are doing now, the next step in terms of how do we improve the supply as continuing the pandemic, right? We need to develop ourselves and go to the next step so that we don't face the same issues as what we faced last year. So there are two main principles that at least we try to follow in our group. Right, one is to be aware of the system interdependencies, right, and the consequence unintended to it. So when I say system interdependency in hospital, right, mostly healthcare systems, they are composed of many interconnected point of care, right. For example, the demand for a baby delivery room spurs demand for postpartum or neonatal care. So system interdependencies mean that changes in one part of the system can generate unintended consequences. So we need to be aware of what is happening when we push the ventilator from one side, what's going to happen on the other side. So we need to have a better clarity on how do we play with the system at the same time managing this overall situation. Today, if I go to the hospital, I can see my guys running with the ventilators wherever possible. So we cannot overflow the operations with too many ventilators, because that's a huge capex. Nobody is giving you an OPEX model today. So if you're going to invest hugely on all the ventilators, what are you going to do once the pandemic gets over? So these are all the questions that keep coming in, right? Already there were several expenses that goes into the system. So next one is on the to forecast the short term demand, right? So when the demand is exploding and systems are overwhelmed, it may seem futile to make the effort to forecast demand a week or two out, right? Today we're not talking about what is going to be my demand after 3 or 6 months. For me, it's tomorrow or next week is what I'm concerned about. Looking at the current situation, I can't even plan for my next month on what I have to buy, whether I have to bulk up my vitals or bulk up on the remdesivir or the PPEs, right? So we go on a day-to-day basis to understand the market situation. So quickly to touch upon on the technology, see already pharma companies they have to rely on technology in terms of the last minute delivery, in terms of overall production and so on in supply chain. Hospital per se, the healthcare industry here, they were lacking the technology for a while, right? Because there was no much focus on the healthcare supply chain, especially the hospital supply chain for a very long time. So this has opened several startups in the last 1 year. There has been a huge focus on the healthcare system, let it be the teleradiology or the telehealth or home ICUs or the apps what we use in terms of video consultation and so on. At the same time, talking to your partners via system, and even today having the negotiations or virtually. So apart from this, we also look at implementing the ERP system. I would say more than 90% of hospitals in India don't even have a ERP system in place. They still use Excel sheet in terms of managing the demand and supply, right? So this has in fact forced, there has been a clear uh, focus from the management in terms of developing and improving the supply chain department within the healthcare um, organization, right? Overall, in all the hospitals, I think it's a great opportunity for everyone in the hospital supply chain to learn to improve their skills and develop the way how they were working and improve the technology part of it. So, like I mentioned, we are also working with all the major pharmaceutical companies in terms of along with the blockchain technology service providers, right? Mainly built a robust drug traceability system, mainly in terms of improving the quality assurance or reduce the stockouts It will also reduce the leakages and automate the workflow. So this is something what we have initiated a couple of them. We have to see how it goes and how do we ensure that we follow this. Also in terms of having knowledge on the overall supply chain, end-to-end supply chain. What is my partner having in his go down, and how do I plan my current inventory and so on. So more than talking about the AI and the robotic process automation, I think today we need to start from the basics in terms of hospital technology management. We are still not there. We should be there maybe in a year or two. But today we need to address the basic requirement of technology in the healthcare industry.
Thank you very much, Madan. You have rightly pointed out the pain point. Many of the hospitals, as you mentioned, the word short-term demand that has come up because of the COVID, and many of the managements have to think how to go about it. If they invest on the new facilities to bulk up the drugs which are in demand now, or what would be the priority to keep up in the stock. As I know, many of the hospitals created new now they also had a thought, are having a thought in the back of their mind that what would be uh, of all these purchases and demands of equipment and all after the COVID comes down once again. So now I would like to come to Mr. Pradeep to throw his view on the same.
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat your question, Sudhir? I missed the question. Can you please repeat it?
Yes, Pradeep, actually, how things are going to be better in future in terms of supply chain, how efficient it could be in the coming days, since we have already suffered these challenges already, and uh, how integration of these emerging technologies are going to be playing a crucial role.
Okay. So yeah, Sudhir, thanks for it's a very good question. So we have seen last year that last year when this pandemic started. So basically, my point is based on the supply chain disruption which happened due to the pandemic situation last year as well as this year only. Otherwise, I see that the complete supply chain model of Indian pharmaceutical companies as well as medical device companies is very good. Only in case of this pandemic we face certain issues. Otherwise things are very much okay, and the use of AI and data IT has really enabled us to get a better benefit from pharmaceutical as well as these medical consumables and device companies. So coming back to the how things are going to improve, how I see what improvement I see. So basically, when the last year the COVID pandemic started, there was huge demand of PPE kit as well as three-ply mask, and in India there was no capability of the manufacturers who would uh, able to supply these items for domestic usage. So we were dependent on the exports from China, mainly from China. So but we the manufacturers used this as an opportunity. They scaled up their production, and right now we are surplus in PPE kit manufacturing. Number two, we are surplus in N95 mask production, and we are also surplus in three-ply mask production. So all these three things we are making very good quality. The quality is as per international standards, and the quantity is also very good. So saying that, it says that when opportunity comes, and for with a better planning we can match up the complete requirement whatever comes for domestic uses, as well as keeping the quality, the good quality product in market. The only problem which we still feel we still face, which is going through since last year, is supplies of gloves. I think we lack in the manufacturing of gloves. I don't know, I don't have very much knowledge about the gloves manufacturing, but I think we are really we are still dependent on Malaysia and Southeast Asia countries like Vietnam and Vietnam, Thailand, to supply the gloves to us. The price and the supply, the disruptions in the supply still exist in gloves. So I think it would take a little bit time to get the supplies of the gloves resumed. Now coming up to this year, so we see disruptions in supplies of remdesivir. The problem is that because no one anticipated that the cases would be so much, and the limited the production of remdesivir was limited. So I think in next one or within next 1 month, we would be having more than sufficient stocks of remdesivir in our supplies. So I think I don't see any problem in remdesivir supplies, because the situation which was 15 days back has been improved, and we are now getting some stocks, sufficient stock of remdesivir. The challenge remains to Actemra, tocilizumab, because we don't have the manufacturing capacity of tocilizumab, since this is a Roche product, and we can't make that product in India. So I think maybe some other alternative can be explored for that particular product. Otherwise, I think in next 2 to 3 months, all these items which are short in supply, the supply may resumed, because we have started to seeing that companies have scaled up their production. I have seen lot of new companies which have come up with these vitamin C, zinc, meropenem, and lot of other things which are used in COVID. So it seems that in next 2 to 3 months, the complete supply chain is going to be resumed, and it going to be normal. Then now coming back to the uses of AI as well as the IT into the supply chain. So working in a hospital, I can say that use of technology is very much important for the supply chain management. If I talk about our internal working, so we use the technology in a very efficient manner in order to our supply planning, inventory management, then how to order to the with the manufacturers and all the economic order quantity. So all these things are done using the IT, and the IT plays a very important role in an efficient supply chain management. So I think these are the two things. Number one, it seems that the system would be smooth in next 2 to 3 months, and the use of IT as well as AI is very important in efficient supply chain management.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep. Now I would come to Mr. Vickram. As Mr. Prasad mentioned, the dependency in future, the dependency on other countries would come down, especially in terms of manufacturing. Is it going to boost the vocal for local mission of India, and also make in India? And at the same time, are we this thought of management of hospitals, at the same time some other manufacturing companies, that it is, as Mr. Madan mentioned, it's going to be a short term demand? How are we going to deal with it? And uh, 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 now we are in this believed to be in the second wave, and there is also a projection that in the coming months there would also be a third wave, and while other countries are also suffering with the fourth wave. What do you have to say about that? Will be in a better position to deal with it, Mr. Vikram?
Wow, that's a big one. I mean, Sudhir, thanks for asking that very elaborate question. But just to start with where you started your question in terms of vocal for local. So Prasad sir was mentioning something very interesting about localization. I mean, there is a lot of national sentiments now coming in. So there's a new word being coined. We've all heard about globalization. Now we are hearing about localization or deglobalization. So yes, it is going to happen. The government of India, last year in their budget has allocated almost about $2 billion. About 15,000 crores for the pharma industry, for the chemical industry, which is a huge amount when you compare it to the 200, 300 crores that used to be allocated every year before this. So production link incentives have been initiated by government of India, and they are encouraging people to set up their manufacturing facilities in India and start producing. But it's not going to happen overnight. Our dependency on China increased from about 30-35% on the bulk drug, and it went up to 65-70% over a period of 2 decades. It was a systemic change that happened because China, of course, had better technology, had more cost effective raw material, and it made business sense to buy from China. So the reversing of this activity is going to happen for sure, because it is going to be also part of de-risking strategy, not being dependent on a single source, single vendor. So it is going to happen, but it's going to take time. So we need to be conscious that we are a slow industry. We are heavily regulated. I have already mentioned that. Probably after aviation and after nuclear, probably pharma is the most regulated industry. So any change in vendor qualification, any new source development, qualifying them, developing stability data, and then getting regulatory approval is a long drawn process. It's Nothing is going to happen overnight. It's not like FMCG, unfortunately. But that's the kind of business we are in. We are in the business of making sophisticated life saving drugs. So it's very important that our industry is regulated, and that localization will happen slowly, probably with the advent of technology, with the advent of financial support from the central and state government. It is very necessary. We have to understand what happened in China for the last 2 decades. There was a systematic support from the Chinese government to these industries to flourish and to develop economies of scales, and invest on new technologies. So I am very sure that localization is going to happen slowly, but it's going to be slow, nothing overnight. Um, what was else? What else did you ask me, Sudhir? You're on mute, Sudhir. Still on mute. Yeah.
I also mentioned about the short-term demand, as Mr. Madan mentioned, the how the management and the manufacturing companies are thinking like the kind of purchases or investment they have to make. Is it going to be useful in the coming days? Because after how are things going to be in the post-pandemic situation?
So, I mean, again, my response to that, Sudhir, is same. I mean, see, from a manufacturing perspective, I speak for a pharmaceutical manufacturer. We are not thinking about anything right now. We are procuring as much material as we can. We are maximizing our capacities to ensure whatever needs to be produced gets produced. I mean, what will happen with the remaining of the bulk drug or the leftover material is, I mean, I can tell you that with a lot of confidence. I've spoken to a lot of friends in the industry. Nobody is right now looking at, being penny wise, trying to save or look at that last mile inventory management, or trying to make it just in time everything. We are going to support the general public, and during this pandemic, the intent from the management, from the pharma industry per se, if you see, look at the entire last 1 year, it started from HCQS being promoted as a miracle drug for COVID, and then then the development of vaccines, be it production of PPE kits, ventilators, oxygen concentrators. So right now, I don't think so. The industry is looking at what will we do with the additional buffer inventory, because the industry itself is overwhelmed. The kind of demand that we are seeing, capacities cannot be converted overnight. Even if I want to give you 100 and my capacity is 10, I am rate limited by my capacity, because capacity development, as I said in the start of my conversation also, is a long and tedious process in pharmaceutical. I cannot overnight create another manufacturing facility to make 1 lakh remdesivir vials from tomorrow. And there are other things in that supply chain also. You have to look at, where do we source the rubber stoppers from, where do we source the API from. I know there's a huge challenge in getting API. So everything is balanced on each other. It's not like everything is in isolation. It's a connected chain. So it's, when a pharmaceutical manufacturer has to manufacture, we are trying to maximize and deliver whatever best we can to meet the needs of the general public during this critical, unprecedented pandemic time. I don't think so there is any inventory planning happening right now. And like I said, capacities are any which ways are difficult to create overnight. So but yes, we have to be prepared for the third and probably fourth wave. When it happens, we'll be better prepared, like we are much better prepared than we were in 2020. We have better prepared. We have a better understanding of the disease, what kind of medication needed. And of course, vaccines are getting developed. We talked about different kinds of vaccines. Couple of vaccines are in India right now. Sputnik has been approved, given emergency approval. I know Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are going to come in India, but it will have logistical challenge. But I know there are 2 or 3 players again in India which are developing very close to their phase 3 trials, and new vaccines are going to come into India. Zydus is developing a non-invasive vaccine. It is going to be like a polio drop, and it's stable at 25 degrees for more than 4 months. So things like this are going to happen. We are going to innovate and going to move forward towards a better management of this disease. And I think you also asked about digitization and the technology that is going to help bridge all this and bring everything to one platform. I mean, we all have known about forecasting, demand sensing. We know about how AI ML can help over there. We know how GPS and shipment trackings can help you track your deliveries to the last mile. But what technology is also going to do, Sudheer, is change the way we take drugs, we consult doctors. The new normal is going to be telemedicines, teleconsulting, and the e-commerce way of handling drugs, how it can go to last mile. So there I feel technology, apart from what my colleagues on the panel have said about technology, in my view, even this is going to be a very important changer with respect to how people consult doctors, how they get their medicines prescribed, and how they are going to get it administered. So technology is going to play a big role over there as well. That's it from my side.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vickram. You rightly mentioned now the future is going to be a lot of focus on the telemedicine and delivery of medicine and healthcare services at the doorstep through the e-commerce system and all. Now, I would, before I end this session, I would like to come to Mr. Prasad and take his view. Are we going to be in a better position to deal with the wave 3 or possibly wave 4 in the coming days? And also, are we going to be the general public are going to be safe or not going to be a victim of the black marketing of the drugs? Over to you, Mr. Prasad.
So, Sudheer, very deep question, and it also the question you intersects with a lot of the cultural and social fabric of our country as well. Are we going to be all safe? I wish I can give you all the feel good answer, but that won't do a justice to all of us as well as to the entire population. Can we be safe? That answer is right, because as they say, destiny is in your own hands. So if we continue to see, there is always, they say in our things, are you a citizen or are you just administered by, managed and governed by the state? A citizen, definition of a citizen in any country is where they are equally responsible for governance. So I would take that parlance into our own. If we choose not to follow the social protocols, if we flout them, we change them, then expecting somebody to just take care of us, we are no more babies. So we are equally adults with the equal responsibilities. Now, as all our esteemed panelists said, are we learning? Yes. As an industry, we are learning. As the hospitals, we are learning. As the caregivers, we are learning. So will we be better prepared for the third wave? I personally believe answer is yes. However, what third wave will become? See, it's like a fighting of the unknown, right? And in the first wave, we did not know the variants will come in the second wave. And I don't want to sound very much on the cliche, but think of the size of our enormous population. We are at 139 crores. I was reading somewhere that is equal to some 22 all the countries with the COVID combined. And so one is the number of the people. The second is the density of the population, which goes very against the grain of the social distancing. Third is how do you provide this affordable access care? Now, you're absolutely right. Will black marketing can be stopped? I think as a country, there is more. I personally like, now this is more of a emotional response than the rational response. I think there is more good in this country than this anti-nationalistic or social elements who are trying to profit when there is, the humanity is at stake. But I think when you look at the bigger side, I believe there is still a lot more good is happening than this. I call it as the dark spots of this response to COVID pandemic. But Sudheer, yes, I think we have learned the lessons across the society, whether it is the caregivers, whether it's pharma, whether it is people, and I think we should be better prepared. But I don't think, as they say, is no, don't get relaxed, be cautious, stay safe, stay home. So that, I think that will still last for another 1 to 2 years, if you ask me. This is not going away in 3-6 months.
Absolutely right. As you rightly mentioned, Mr. Prasad, that we are hoping that we are will be in a better position to deal with the wave 3 or possibly wave 4, and the black marketing doesn't affect the general citizens who are in the pain and to provide healthcare to their near and dear ones. And before I sign off, we are hoping that this is actually a very interesting discussion that could go on. I wish it could go on, but with the positive time, we'll end here. We might come up with some other edition where we would like to have the newer questions that is directly linked with the concerns of the citizens, public health, and all. I would like to thank each and every speaker for making this session enriching and fruitful, and how our future is going to be, how we as citizens, how I hope the government also focuses a lot, and how it can help the industry and also the general citizens to deal with this pandemic, which is not going to end sooner. It is going to be there, and a new order, new normal has already been established. I would like to thank Mr. Prasad Deshpande, who's the senior uh, VP with the Biocon, and I would also like to thank Mr. Madan Sampat with Aster DM Healthcare, Pradeep Mishra, Group Head SCM Paras Hospitals, and Vickram Srivastava, IPCA Laboratories Limited. Thank you very much, all. We would be jotting down all this important discussion in the form of a conclave report that would be reaching you soon, and the same We'd also be reaching the Ministry of Health, Government of India, and other state government stakeholders. With this, I would like to thank each and everyone and all the audience who have joined us from various means of our YouTube channel and also Twitter. We would also be making this available in Facebook soon. Thank you very much, everyone.